When was Disneyland's golden age? When did it peak? Some people would say back when Walt Disney was alive in the 50s or 60s. Other people I know would 100% say that Disneyland peaked in the 20-teens. I suppose it almost definitely depends on what era you're the most nostalgic for. And although personally I'm obsessed with Disneyland in every era, I must admit, if we're talking about pure nostalgia, I often find myself thinking about Disneyland in the 90s. And if you agree with me, well then you're in luck. Because look at this, welcome to Disneyland in the 1990s, thanks to an old VHS tape of press footage, of B-roll footage of Disneyland, taken just before the opening of Indiana Jones in 1995. Today, we're going back to the Magic Kingdom of the mid-90s. This is Disneyland 1995. And the first thing most people saw when they came to Disneyland back then was the giant welcome sign on Harbor Boulevard saying welcome in different languages on the digital display. Also would announce special events and things. Sadly, that sign is long gone now and wasn't really replaced by anything. In fact, it's kind of an ordeal just to stand where that sign used to be. But as for the rest of the park, I'm excited to get inside and compare the Disneyland of St. Patrick's Day 2025 to the Disneyland of my childhood 30 years ago in 1995. Boy, not much has changed up here at Main Street Station. I mean, we've got Minnie Mouse in the planter, I think for Women's History Month, and then of course up here on top of Main Street Station, there's a little box behind that ironwork in the sort of center of your screen. That's for lighting, for the candlelight ceremony and different stuff for Christmas, but not much has changed down here. I mean, some things at Disneyland are just evergreen. Other things have changed so very much. I'm excited to see where this footage takes us. Now, one thing that's surprisingly changed quite a bit is the castle. Ever since the 60th anniversary, not only was it significantly altered for the 50th anniversary of Disneyland, but especially during the 60th anniversary, it got a whole different, much brighter paint scheme. And of course, I don't know if you noticed, in the hub, those original olive trees from the 1950s have been replaced since then, although they are in private hands today. We still have those horse-drawn streetcars on Main Street USA, just like we did back in the day, although they just put them away backstage right as I walked into the park. And look at this, you have the old Disneyland band marching down Main Street USA, and as the footage zooms out, you'll notice something else has changed on Main Street USA, which is Main Street itself. The actual pavement on the ground has been changed around the horse-drawn streetcar tracks, getting all this new brickwork here in the last few decades. Definitely a change that I think makes Disneyland look a whole lot better. You still have sort of this asphalt on either side of the brickwork around the tracks that were replaced and upgraded not too many years ago. Back in the 90s, as a kid walking down here, it just looked like any old paved street. And although the Disneyland band has also changed quite a bit in recent years, it's become a much more lean, mean fighting machine than the big band you saw marching down Main Street in the 90s. There is still a Disneyland band roaming around to this very day. Definitely a change going from those old olive trees to these trees that now have these pink flowers on them every spring here at Disneyland. The partner statue was here in 95, but it was brand spanking new back then. I believe it was only installed in 1993. That was a brand spanking new Walt Disney back then. You know, it's easy to look at old photos of the castle from the 50s through the 90s and think, man, it was all just gray and sort of light blue back then. And it certainly was more gray and more muted than you see it here today in its bright post 60th anniversary color scheme. I mean, it's got all those beautiful golden stars on the roof. The roof is really bright blue. There's a lot more pink popping out at you since they sort of remodeled the castle after the Diamond celebration in the past 10 years. But as you can see in this shot, it all depends on what angle you're at, because from a different angle, the castle looked much more pink than it does in other photographs and video from the time. It's always had sort of the same color scheme. It's just back then it used to fade in the sunlight a lot faster. Sometimes I kind of think they went full color like this in the last 10 years just to prevent that from happening, you know? So it'd be a long time till they have to replace that roof again. Oh, look at this. This is random. Here comes Mickey Mouse and all his friends. It's nice to see some old familiar faces in the Main Street vehicles cruising down on St. Patrick's Day out here. That's cute. Anyway, now's when the adventure really begins. Time to stop dilly-dallying and head into the lands. And first up is the land that my family always started with on our trips to Disneyland in the 90s, Adventureland. Now, since 1995, this entire gate and this entire walkway has been widened pretty significantly. All of this was pretty much replaced in the last 10 years. Unfortunately, my footage from the 90s doesn't really show that. We're zoomed in pretty tight on the top of the Adventureland gate in the footage from my VHS tape, but there's still some changes because instead of the wooden carvings that sort of look like tusks, with the wooden Adventureland mask in the center of the gate like we have now in the 21st century, back in the 90s, you still had those original Disneyland ivory tusks, and that thing in the middle, that is a severed head. We can actually get a much better look at that severed head back in the 60s and 70s from the collection of Daveland online. It's crazy that that severed head was there basically from when Walt Disney was knocking about the park all the way up until the 90s, and after that, I guess, severed heads and ivory were no longer politically correct, and so they were replaced. Although I have to say, that old severed head, you can never tell, is that supposed to be a severed head or like a painted coconut? What is that? And I've never figured out exactly what year they switched to this wooden mask above the gate to Adventureland, but I must say, for my part, he's become a lot more iconic to me than that old severed head ever was. Next up is another pretty tight shot that was just for these publicity purposes, but it shows something that is now missing. As you can see here today, on top of the Tiki Juice Bar in front of the Tiki Room, there is no more canoe and no more Tiki God up there. That was Uti. Uti was the goddess of fishermen that used to sit on top of the little hut, standing in front of the Tiki Room, welcoming us all in with her torch, which is a nod to real Polynesian fishermen doing the sort of nighttime torch fishing. She was removed sometime around the 50th anniversary of Disneyland and never put back, so it's nice to see her here in this footage from the 90s. We also have some beautiful footage from inside the Tiki Room, just a couple of clips showcasing its old school original show in the 90s, before next we pan down on the entrance to the Jungle Cruise, something that has basically not changed at all since that promotional footage was shot, at least that tight shot there, and that is because this entire facade for the Jungle Cruise was brand new back then. The Jungle Cruise had been down for quite a while, and the whole dock area and the building here and even the course of the rivers themselves were completely remodeled and transformed, and the whole reason that it had closed down and they were reconfigured was because they were working on Indiana Jones' Adventure Temple of the Forbidden Eye that would open up in 1995. In fact, the footage we're looking at today came on the very same press kit VHS tape that I used when we documented the 30th anniversary of this ride just a week or so ago, before they closed it up for a little refurbishment. And we didn't ride the ride alone. We actually got to ride with John Rhys Davies, Sala himself. So if you missed that episode, definitely go back and check that out. I show a ton of footage of the opening ceremony and the opening day of the Indiana Jones Adventure, which is why we're sort of skipping over it for the moment. Suffice to say, this was a big deal, a big change, probably the biggest change that happened in the middle of the 90s. And it took a lot longer to construct than refurbishing the rerouted Jungle Cruise with its new queue building, its new line building here, which opened at least a year before in March of 1994 with this brand new show building here, or I guess not show building, line building, and that new sign right there, the new classic sign. Before this, the entrance looked completely different. It's about the same time that we got the new tropical import stand with its barrels full of rubber, jiggler spiders and snakes. We got a little more Middle Eastern flavor in Adventureland that year because it's the same year that Aladdin's Dinner Oasis opened over here and replaced the Tahitian Terrace. Now, there's no footage of that included on the VHS tape that I've got. And of course, Aladdin's Oasis has since been replaced by the Tropical Hideaway over here, which is much more like the old Tahitian Terrace, but I love that they kept this little mosaic magic carpet on the ground at the entrance. Upgrades. Moving on here, we actually do have a ton of footage on the ride, on the Jungle Cruise as it appeared after it reopened in 1994 with the upgraded sort of animatronics out there in the river, the hippos and the climbers on the poles pole out there that have since been changed and remodeled, so that's a lot different today. It's also worth mentioning, by the way, that 1994 was the first year of the Jungle Cruise boat's new look, where they look all kind of old and they fit into that Indiana Jones theme. Of course, before that they had those stripy, old school Disneyland roofs on top. But I love that the Jungle Cruise is still here and still in more or less the same condition it was back in the 90s. They changed some scenes on the ride itself, including that climbing the pole scene we saw a second ago. But the Jungle Cruise has been left more or less intact. Not so for our next stop, the old school Swiss family treehouse, which had essentially not really changed between the 1960s when it opened and 30 years later in the 1990s. Although since then, it has undergone quite a few changes, as a matter of fact. It closed in 1999 and then reopened, I think, in the same year as Tarzan's treehouse, with a whole bunch of changes to the inside and up at the top. But the biggest change of all is that they built basically a whole other tree right here in the middle of this walkway, where you walked up a stairwell and then there was a rope bridge to get to the old classic Swiss family treehouse. And then Tarzan's treehouse closed down in 2021 and then was kind of reverted back to its Swiss theme, reopening in 2023 as Adventureland treehouse, inspired by Walt Disney's Swiss Family Robinson. Why didn't they use the old name? I don't know. But at least now in 2025, just like back in 1995, you can hear the sweet, sweet sounds of the Switzka polka playing in there. This is one case where if you were a kid in the 90s, you kind of got a little piece of your childhood version of Disneyland back. That's something that almost never happens. Next up, we have Pirates of the Caribbean. The footage of the outside is limited from the 90s, but this is the amazing thing, where today you have the Dream Suite upstairs and downstairs the entrance to Pirates of the Caribbean here. Back in the 90s, you could see upstairs there was a store called the Disney Gallery, where they sold that sort of Disneyland fine art and stuff. They would give you a lyric sheet to the Pirates of the Caribbean song and a little map if you asked politely. That space up there was originally designed to be Roy and Walt Disney's family's apartments for when they wanted to come down and stay at Disneyland. In fact, over here on the side, on the little porch, the balcony over here, you can still see the Walt Disney and Roy Disney initials, gold leafed right there, in the ironwork back in 1995. And this was all pretty new still for the 90s. This was all reconstructed and this bridge was sort of added when they put in Fantasmic back in 1992. But back in the mid 90s, you could roam around in front of Pirates and head up the stairs, up to the second floor to the Disney Gallery, and basically just roam around the rooms that were meant to be Walt and Roy's apartment. Of course, then it changed and became the Dream Suite, so they decked it all out for people to stay who won sweepstakes and different stuff like that. And then later they added 21 Royals, so they added a very fancy, very expensive, and exclusive dining experience up there. But back in the day, you could just roam around up there. It was awesome. Now, as you can see at the moment, Pirates of the Caribbean is closed in 2025, but that's okay. We really want to ride it back in 1995, back before the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, before they changed so many colorful characters that we all knew and loved from back in the day. Most of them are still in there, just altered in some form, and that would include the original Buy a Wench for a Bride auction scene. What be I offered for this winsome wench? Stout-hearted and corn-fed she be. Oh, and the original redhead in there. We want the redhead! We want the redhead! You've got the old pooped pirate in a barrel with the lady popping out of the barrel. And this is back when the pirates used to chase the ladies. Look at them running for their lives. Oh, that was family entertainment in the 90s back then. I don't mind a little Jack Sparrow. I just wish he wasn't shouted out as frequently as he is in the ride today. They're constantly, Captain Jack Sparrow! Feels like every 3 seconds. But I never minded the changes too much. I mean, some things have to change. It's just the way it is. It's not my theme park. It's not your theme park. It's Disney's theme park. I will say, though, I do miss that original pirate ship without Barbossa. Now, moving on from Pirates of the Caribbean, on the VHS tape I have, there's not too much footage of New Orleans Square. Sadly, there's no shot of the old Club 33 or anything like that. But there is one lonely, kind of amazing shot of New Orleans Square that at first glance doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. When you look closer, look at this. The tree planter is still here. It's been changed and covered with bricks. The tree is still here, although some of the limbs in that shot have been cut off. But here you can actually see a lot of the changes made to this part of New Orleans Square when they built the new Club 33. I have to say, the brickwork and the tile over here, over on top of the planter instead of the bare concrete, is definitely an improvement. It looks a lot weirder with this bridge over here connecting the two halves of Club 33 now. Things have certainly changed a lot, and yet not that much. And those are the changes that I love. I love when they're able to sort of adapt and repurpose parts of Disneyland, upgrade them, without changing the spirit of it too much. Now, the reason there's not too much footage of New Orleans Square as it stood in the mid-90s is because most of the New Orleans section of the video had to do with the Haunted Mansion. And there's only one quick shot of the outside, but more had actually changed since the 90s than I realized. Because first of all, the brick columns on either side of the entrance got a lot taller than they used to be, and I never really noticed it when they added this top piece that kind of links the columns and forms this gate here. I never knew when they made that change. I didn't notice it at the time. Again, that's another great change where they widened that gateway there, probably to include Fast Pass. That's probably when it happened. That's one of the things I love about these then and now videos, because even I, who had an annual pass here in the 90s and have witnessed a lot of the changes they've made firsthand, I never really realized that they had changed it and put in that top piece of the gate and sort of raised up and extended the height of these columns on either side. Anyway, obviously now in 2025, we have some major new changes. Since the 90s, not only did they add Haunted Mansion Holiday and Fast Pass, which widened the gate there, but recently they've also added a whole new standby queue, so a whole new area to walk through, several little gardens out here. But once again, I don't really care about the Haunted Mansion in 2025. Today, I care about the Haunted Mansion in 1995.
And this VHS did not disappoint me. Look at this. I love this stationary camera shot where you can really see that candelabra moving around down that endless hallway. Ooh, and look at this. We got the caretaker out in the graveyard, shaking and quaking in his boots. I wonder what's next on here. No. What? Oh! That startled me. Look at these ghosts up on the chandelier, rocking back and forth. Nice to get a good look at them. You can't show footage of the Haunted Mansion without having at least a few clips of the ballroom. Look at the dancers down there, and I love the organ player. That's supposedly the organ from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Look at the haunts in there. Overall, I just love that the Haunted Mansion hasn't changed all that much. I love that it's still very much the same ride that people have been enjoying since 1969.
But look at this, look at the original Madame Leota. Not only is she not floating around the room, but look above her head at that lamp right there. The old Madame Leota may have been changed and upgraded since that footage was taken, and stationary non-floating Madame Leota may be a thing from the past we'll never get back, but we recently got something from that footage back right over here in the new gift shop, Madame Leota Somewhere Beyond, because just inside these gigantic barn doors at the entrance to the gift shop, look above this crystal ball. Supposedly, that is the original Madame Leota lamp from inside of the Haunted Mansion. The same lamp, if everything Disney is telling us is true, that you see hovering above Leota in this footage. Now, it's grainy, it's VHS, it's terrible quality, but to me though, the lamp looks different. I mean, this lamp is certainly old. You can see the cool spider web pattern on it. It's very similar, dangling crystals and beads and stuff like that. But somehow, to my eye, it does not look the same as the lamp in that VHS footage. Could just be me, could just be the graininess and the quality, but I'm skeptical. Let me know what you think down below. Now, down at this end of the park, this big old ugly barn blocking the view of the sun and the Haunted Mansion isn't the only change since 1995. Because of course, since then, and very recently in fact, Critter Country has become Bayou Country. Splash Mountain has become Tiana's Bayou Adventure. The old Chickapin Hill that we all used to look up on with so much awe and reverence has become Tiana's sort of Bayou Mountain over here, which means all our friends from the old Laugh-In Place have now gone the way of the buffalo. They've disappeared into that bayou. I still haven't ridden the Disneyland version of Tiana's Bayou Adventure. I did just ride it for the first time in Florida at Disney World very recently, and I always enjoy and always have fun checking out Disney's newest attractions, but I got to admit, every once in a while, I get those old familiar songs stuck in my head, and although there's always going to be those people who want to turn it into something bad, I can't help but be a little nostalgic for a ride that I grew up with and have so many memories on. Now, the whole Splash Splash Mountain Tiana's Bayou adventure change was pretty recent. We had Splash Mountain till very recently, but something we haven't had in a long time is something else that popped up in just a brief amount of footage. Disneyland's Country Bear Playhouse entrance, the same little covered bridge that is now the entrance to Winnie the Pooh, the little Winnie the Pooh dark ride here in what's now Bayou Country, I guess. You saw the then and now, that brief shot of the sign right over that covered bridge. Back over here where you load onto Pooh today, which has quite a line, that's how you know it's busy. What is now the portal to the 100-acre wood was once the entrance to the Country Bear Playhouse, where the Country Bear Jamboree played every day out here at Disneyland. Yes, into the 90s. Unlike the one in Florida, the Country Bear Jamboree at Disneyland actually had 2 separate theaters inside, which meant double the capacity, which meant it was often actually sitting back here kind of empty and idle. This was once the exit to the Country Bear Jamboree, by the way. It's now the exit for Pooh. That's why it closed on September 9th, 2001, if I've got my facts straight. And as you can imagine, the mourning over Country Bears didn't last long because we had much bigger problems just 2 days later, if you know what I mean. It literally closed 2 days before 9/11, which is probably why in my mind I don't remember the closing at all. It was just totally overshadowed by other events going on in the USA. Anyway, even though the glimpse of the Country Bear Jamboree, the Disneyland version, is brief in this press footage that I've got, it's always nice to be reminded of an old attraction at Disneyland that you grew up going on, you know? It's like opening an old yearbook and going, oh my gosh, I almost forgot about that guy. He used to be my best friend. Anyways, that's basically the extent of the Critter Country footage we've got to look at today. That's okay, it leaves us more time for other things, specifically other Frontierland things, including, of course, the Mark Twain riverboat, which I'm happy to report is still chugging its way around the original rivers of America and not set to go away anytime soon. I mean, what would the original Magic Kingdom be without its rivers of America? I genuinely mean that. There's 100% footage of the Mark Twain in the 90s on this VHS tape, which I love so much. So Mark Twain, the riverboat, the rivers of America, is such an integral part of what makes Disneyland, Disneyland, you know? Now I'm fast forwarding, pun very much intended, past some other Frontierland footage that we have for the moment because I don't want to miss that last raft over to Tom Sawyer Island for a couple of reasons. One, we do have some footage of Tom Sawyer Island in 1995, but also I have a pretty big announcement, and there's no better place to make that announcement than over here after our raft journey. Now, Tom Sawyer Island is legitimately one of my favorite parts of Disneyland and of the Magic Kingdom. And if you don't believe me, I mean, let's consider something here. You're talking about a guy with a Mark Twain tattoo on his arm, for God's sakes. And this place, this island right here, was a huge part of my childhood that started my obsession with Mark Twain. Because by the time I read Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, I was already kind of familiar with the story just because of the island and the riverboat. Then I got obsessed with Mark Twain himself and sort of his life story and his travels. I've traveled many places that Mark Twain has been. The point is, I've always loved this island, especially back in the 90s when I was just a kid. I mean, I was 7 years old in 1990, and then at different times in the 90s, I had an annual pass when I was more towards the teenage years, and I spent a lot of time roaming around here, and I loved escaping over to Tom Sawyer Island. But here's the thing, Tom Sawyer Island has changed quite a bit since the 1990s because, of course, of the popularity of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. They transformed the theme of the island to Pirate's Lair on Tom Sawyer Island. So here you have the old cave changed to the Dead Man's Grotto, and you can see Captain Jack Sparrow's signature up there on the warning sign. The cast members are dressed like pirates, and you can now visit the Pirate's Den. And I like it. I like that they found a way to sort of plus Tom Sawyer Island and give it new life, make it exciting for a new generation of kids while still keeping the Tom Sawyer Island name. After all, Walt Disney did design this island himself personally. Here's the thing, there's only a few clips of Tom Sawyer Island in that promotional VHS footage. However, one of the reasons I always loved Tom Sawyer Island at the Magic Kingdom so much more than I love sort of the pirate version of it here, even though this is the original, is because the Magic Kingdom version never underwent that Pirate's Lair transformation. So it's much more like the original Tom Sawyer Island used to be when I was a small boy in the 80s and 1990s. For one thing, since that island is so much bigger than the original island, even as an adult, it felt expansive, like a place you could really stretch out and explore, much like this island felt to me when I was a lot smaller and this island seemed a lot bigger for another thing. Here in Anaheim, the original Fort Wilderness, that's right, that's where the name comes from, Walt Disney World people. The original Fort Wilderness was closed and gutted and basically just turned into Fantasmic dressing rooms. So we lost our fort, we lost our escape tunnel. So if you want to know what Tom Sawyer Island was like at Disneyland in the 90s, go check out my recent videos, just a few episodes back from Walt Disney World, where we kind of have a love letter to Tom Sawyer Island as it exists in the Magic Kingdom today. It's not long for this Earth though. Disney is trying to get rid of it. So definitely, and that's another reason to go check that video out. I went a little overboard with a more than complete tour of the island and the Liberty Bell Riverboat over there, and we got to drive it. It's a fun video. Now, as for that footage from the 1990s, nowadays, when the suspension bridge is open at all, they will usually have a cast member out here telling you not to jump up and down on the bridge or spacing people out so they can only go a few at a time. They don't want any accidents out here. So obviously, the sort of spirit of adventure has changed a little bit with modern liability issues. Hey, but at least the suspension bridge is still here. Probably needs a little maintenance at the moment, but it's here today looking much as it did back in the mid-90s, although of course it's surrounded by a little bit more pirate stuff. But then again, Tom Sawyer went to the island to play pirate, so I feel like Tom Sawyer, Joe Harper, and Huck Finn would actually really enjoy this version of the island. No qualms. All right, the other small piece of footage we have from the mid-90s is of something kind of rare, or it's been rare in recent decades, something you couldn't even get up near until recently, which is this. The original Tom and Huck's treehouse, which as you can see, even back in the mid-90s, you could still climb up inside of. In fact, you could climb in it from 1956 all the way up until the 90s. Today, it's all sadly kind of roped off and blocked up and closed off from kids climbing up through the old dead tree and into the treehouse itself. That is definitely one major change on the island. For a long time, you couldn't even access this part of the island. Like, all the stairways were closed to get up anywhere near the treehouse, and I'm glad you could at least come look at it, although I see lots of confused kids climbing around the roots going, why can't we go up there? I don't know what to tell you, kids. Maybe it has something to do with that there duct tape. As much as I'm afraid of heights, I do wish we could still climb up there, but I'm just glad this section of the island is open at all now, because of course, right on this tree, right underneath the treehouse itself, is that little knot with Tom and Becky's names carved into the side of the tree. Oh my gosh, there be a squall blowing in. The weather has completely changed. It went from very friendly and sunny to very unfriendly, kind of breezy. Oh, it must be Wednesday. A lot of stuff has changed on Tom Sawyer Island, which is really a subject for another day. Harper's Mill disappeared, replaced by this little building here that's sort of the centerpiece of Fantasmic. A lot of walkways are closed at the moment. It could use a little TLC coming up here. And I probably could have stayed on the other side of the rivers of America and showed you those couple of shots taken over here, except that I have something very cool to show you, which I'll talk about more at the end of the video. For whatever reason, and there's a lot of them, I have not made a new Random Land pin, like a pin, for 5 years, for more than 5 years. And this just felt like the perfect place to announce that that is no longer the case. A brand new Random Land pin is on the way, will be for sale in just a couple days. Like I said, I'll tell you more about that when we're not at Disneyland, but I just had to share the epic new pin design with you. Are you ready? Check this out right here. It's the new Random Land pin. You've heard of a whitewater rafting adventure. You ever heard of a Random Land rafting adventure? Ever hear tell of that? Ooh, I'm just unsealing the very first one here. And I know it was kind of hard to see with the plastic on it, but look at this. This might be my personal favorite pin that we have ever made. This is awesome. I'm so tempted to just leave that right there for somebody to find on Tom Sawyer Island, but I know there's equal odds that a cast member will come and just chuck it in the bin or put it in lost and found. So I'll have to tell you how and when you can get your own one of these pins later on at the end of the video. I wasn't even planning on showing this today, but it showed up on my front doorstep yesterday, and I had left one right by the front door. So as I was coming and heading out to the park, I just sort of grabbed it, and I'm glad I did, because what better place to first reveal the Mark Twain Raft Adventure inspired pin than on the, at least theoretically, Mark Twain themed island here at Disneyland. Incidentally, there are a lot of Canada geese nesting over here on Tom Sawyer Island right now. They're mean, they'll hiss at you, they'll bite you. Do not pet the geese. All right, well, this weather change is making it hard for me to tell what time it is now. But either way, it's probably time for us to vacate Tom Sawyer Island and head back to the mainland and continue our 1990s Disneyland adventure. Now, as for Frontierland, for whatever reason in this promotional footage, there is a ton of footage of Big Thunder Mountain. And I really like the first shot of it because you can see the sort of loading platform right there under that shack in front of Big Thunder Mountain itself. And now you can see what it looks like today, where the trees have grown up out of control. One of the main things people say when they come from other Disney parks to this one is, wow, everything looks so tiny, and part of that is because they've let the trees grow up so tall around everything. All sense of scale is really lost. Look at this beautiful Big Thunder Mountain footage, which is all the more impressive because, of course, back in the day, cameras were a lot bulkier, especially back in '94. They didn't have any stabilization, and that footage looks amazing. There is one really important thing missing from that footage, though. I was hoping it would show the old earthquake scene on the lift hill at the end. Sadly, that shot was not included. Oh man, I've gotten stepped on a lot today. Partially my fault for having size 14 feet, and partially because it's heaving at Disneyland on St. Patrick's Day this year. I want to do what every other old man does and tell you, it was different back in the day. Back in the 90s, you'd never see crowds like this. That's not true. On the weekends in the summer, you'd see crowds as bad, if not much worse than you see at Disneyland at the moment. It's just that now, there's no sort of off-season anymore. People ask me all the time, what's the best time to come to Disneyland when it's not going to be crowded? There is no guaranteed best time anymore. And that's because of the reservation system. They've managed to spread out the crowds, not to make them thinner, to make the park more full all the time. That's one change I don't like, but other people definitely swear by. Okay, now we're headed towards our destination. We're getting out towards the front of Frontierland because in the footage from the 90s, there's a great shot of people crossing this bridge and entering Frontierland, which you can see right here. Notice two things. One, that is very much a bridge you have to cross to get into Frontierland. And notice that the walkway isn't wide enough for more than 3 people to walk side by side. Whereas today, they've not only completely changed all the woodwork and the log stockade of Frontierland, they have widened that gateway quite a bit. They have really enlarged that sign hanging over the entrance to Frontierland. And now the walkway, as you can see when I was coming out of Frontierland, is huge. You can fit a ton of people side by side. In fact, this walkway into Frontierland is now so wide, most people don't even realize that you are in fact crossing over a bridge, because the bridge is now so much wider. I mean, look at this, than it is deep. Crazy. It's actually the same thing with Adventureland as it is with Frontierland. You're supposed to have the feeling of walking over bridges, which were very narrow back in the 50s and stayed pretty narrow all the way through the 90s, and then got super wide in the 2010s and 20s when they opened up Star Wars Land here, which, if we're talking about changes, is also when all these walkways started to slope down into the hub, slope down to the street here instead of having curbs, and also when they took out quite a lot of the benches that used to be out here. Now, I really have no comment on whether that's better or worse or was necessary or unnecessary. I'll leave that up to you guys to decide and argue about in the comments and on forums all over the internet. For my part, it's just a change that happened, and I'm looking at what's changed. All right, I've got just a couple more things to show you. First, though, we've got to enter Fantasyland, because much to my surprise, there was a ton of footage of Fantasyland on the ride. So like right over here at the newly reimagined Snow White's Enchanted Wish, there's some footage from the 90s that shows the original Snow White's Scary Adventures title to the ride, and a zoom up at the old evil queen in the window. Unfortunately, as far as inside the old version of the ride, there's just one shot of the old hag mixing up that poisoned apple, which is amazing. But there's a ton of shots of the old Peter Pan's flight in there. You can see how it was before they plussed up some of the projections and little effects in there. There's a couple of shots of Pinocchio, which was only 10 or 12 years old at the time of this footage, so it was still a relatively new ride. Not much had changed on it. There's a beautiful shot of the carousel in motion, which, as you can see, looks pretty much the same today. There's a great aerial shot of Dumbo, actually, or it might have been an older shot from the Skyway, perhaps. And Dumbo obviously has really changed in the past few years, which unfortunately would be a lot more visible from the air if we could get an aerial shot today because of the new line they've added behind it. One thing I wasn't expecting but was really cool to see was a shot of the original Fantasyland Monstro in the mid-90s. Monstro was actually rebuilt in 1996. The way you can tell is in the old footage, you see these skinny little teeth, his old teeth. And post-1996, you see his brand new set of chompers, his veneers right there. He got a major facelift, totally rebuilt as a matter of fact. And that's when he got his one winking eye, but we've already talked about that recently. Now, considering this is Disneyland promotional footage we're looking at, it comes as no surprise that there's a ton of footage of the Mad Tea Party, the teacups cruising around, or I should say spinning around and around and around back in the 90s, pretty much looking exactly like they look today. Some things, like I said earlier, are just evergreen out here. I was also happy to discover quite a bit of Alice in Wonderland footage, a little bit of footage from the outside of the attraction, which by the way, looks pretty much just like it did back in the 90s, although this tree just keeps on growing, but mostly footage from inside the ride before it was plussed up with all these fancy modern projectors. Look at that, you got the Cheshire Cat lighting up out there, some of the flowers and bees from inside the ride. And I love this scene with the door opening now. It's totally different because of all the different projections that they have in there today. That is so old school, so charming, so cute, so quaint, you might say. All of that was absolutely lovely, and I was stoked to see it on that VHS tape. But I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that the next thing on the tape absolutely blew Alice in Wonderland out of my brain entirely. It was almost Mandela effect-like, something I had forgotten all about until I saw this footage again. It came racing back at me from the past. You know what it is? It's a small world in living color. Now, I can't match up those shots as closely as I'd like to because of the construction walls out here. They're changing It's a Small World. They're actually supposed to add an extra verse written by the original songwriters, or one of them, the Sherman brothers. Well, before he passed away, Richard Sherman really pushed to get one final new verse into the end of It's a Small World that we're supposedly going to see once this sort of restoration is complete. Walt Disney? But this is something I had completely forgotten about. It's a Small World in rather 90s looking, but very bright, colorful tones. Of course, originally when this ride opened here at Disneyland in 1966, the exterior facade was all white and gold, much as you see it today in the 2020s. And that's actually how it's meant to be. But in 1992, there was a color explosion. They decided to incorporate some of Mary Blair's color stylings. Mary Blair's the artist who came up with It's a Small World and did 99% of the design. And if you were alive in 1992, you know exactly why they did it. It was just sort of that kid-friendly period. Everything got way more colorful at that time. That's when all the pink neon was everywhere. Crazy colorful windbreakers and fanny packs and all that stuff was coming into vogue, and everything kid-friendly had to be bright and colorful, and Small World was no exception. Now, if I remember correctly, it stayed like that from 1992 until 2002. So basically from the time I was about 9 until 19. But for whatever reason, I almost never remember that our It's a Small World here in Anaheim got that colorful. Like when I go to Disneyland Paris's Small World is very colorful because it also opened in 1992. And so for a little while, Disneyland in Anaheim and Disneyland in France, our small worlds actually matched. And so whenever I'd go to Paris, especially the first time, I was like, dang, I have the strongest, most weirdest, vivid memory of Disneyland looking like this. But after a few times going back and forth, it almost became like Mandela effect. Like, did that really happen or did I imagine it? Because in my head, the original always has that original white and gold paint scheme. So yeah, they put it back in 2002. It's been white and gold ever since. Also during the 90s, they had something called Disney Afternoon Avenue because of course they had Darkwing Duck, they had Tailspin, they had all this stuff. You had the motorboat cruise still over here, which was sort of like a boat version of the Autopia, except you really couldn't steer, you were on a guide rail. This was actually the loading dock for the motorboat cruise. You had a motorboat cruise through Gummy Glen, so it was all gummy bears themed during the 90s and all that stuff. Boy, I did a video on that, what, 12 years ago now? Yikes, time flies. Anyway, thinking of that as I stand out here in front of It's a Small World and I'm trying to remember, you know, Small World in color from back in the 90s, crazy. I just remembered that last week we filmed a whole video at 90s Night Out here where a lot of those Disney Afternoon characters actually returned to the park, so check that out if you didn't see it. All right, It's a Small World in color, amazing. Blew my mind when I saw that footage. Like, okay, I didn't dream that. That was definitely the highlight of me finding this footage, was like, holy crap, the colorful It's a Small World. All right, gang, as you see, it is growing dark and gloomy out here at Disneyland. It got really cold all of a sudden. I have no sleeves, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but there is footage on this tape of Mickey's Toontown right after it opened up in those golden years. We have on-the-ride footage from the Matterhorn and of Tomorrowland with lots of things that have disappeared. But I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that, not to be a tease, but because some of that footage is like insane. There's a lot of changes, a lot of then and now to show you in Tomorrowland, and of course showing you Toontown, which has recently changed quite a bit, and apparently changes in the air, because look behind us, there's change everywhere at Disneytown. But anyway, if I included that stuff, if I included those lands, this video would end up being 3 hours long. Plus, I've got somewhere exciting to take you, somewhere exciting to be in just a little bit outside the park. So I'm gonna make my way over to Tomorrowland, past the horde of people wearing green, although all the sweatshirts have come out, so a lot of the green t-shirts are now hidden at this point, and see if I can warm myself up with some gluten-free fries. Then we'll probably take off and get out of here. So there will be a part 2 to Disneyland in the 90s, and a part 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 if some of you want to send me your 90s Disneyland photos, or even better, your videos. I can transfer them and send you the VHS tape down and a digital version. The 90s and the 80s are the hardest period for people like me, like Disneyland footage collectors and old photo collectors, to get a hold of. And so that's why I haven't done a lot of 80s and 90s videos, because people don't want to give up their VHS tapes. I'm still always looking for more, but I got tons of footage from the 50s, the 60s, even the 70s, with the 80s and 90s. That is tough. So if you want more episodes like this, you want to keep the Random Land Scarchives growing, get it? Because I'm Justin Scarred. Get it? Get it? The Scarchives? Anyway, if you want to help me do more 80s and 90s Disneyland videos, let me know. Send some footage my way. My Instagram is @JustinScarred, and there's an email link right on there, right on my Instagram profile. Okay, I'm gonna grab some fries really quick. Be right back with you, because we have somewhere else very exciting to go tonight, and you don't want to miss it. You know what? I was gonna eat Disneyland's gluten-free fries, and then I remembered I live like 3 miles away from here, and the beautiful Miss Allie is cooking me some gluten-free pasta, so I'm just gonna head home, especially because, like I said, look at this, look at the size of that crowd. I didn't realize it's also spring break. I should have realized, because when I got up this morning, I was going out the door and I saw London in the house. I was like, what are you doing home? And he goes, spring break. I go, oh yeah, okay, spring break. Did not think for 1 second that that might possibly affect Disneyland today, much less with St. Patrick's Day. Look at this duck. He's cruising around the strawberry patch. Look at all the strawberries in there. They're mostly green now. You can see a little bit of red. Strawberry action. Are you eating do ducks eat strawberries? That's nuts. What the duck? Ooh, words 90s Justin certainly would have never uttered. Guys, I think it's the right decision leaving Disneyland right now. I feel a sprinkling beginning. People are running to get ponchos and rain jackets, because it's about to come on to rain in a little bit. So like I said, I think we're making the right choice, splitting now, getting out while the getting's good. By the way, when I was a kid in the 90s, especially the early 90s and then in the 80s, I cried every time. Every time we had to leave Disneyland, even if they were like, okay, it's our last ride, the park closes. If you get on this ride, we can't get on any other rides, because once we're off the ride, all the other rides will be closed. There's nothing we can do. Okay, yeah, I understand. But every single time we'd be walking out of me, I don't want to ever leave Disneyland. And then look how I grew up. If the boy is what the prophecy of the man, then the man doesn't want to leave Disneyland? I don't know where I was going with that. I got so cold. Time to go home and warm myself up. Oh, I gotta stamp my feet. Cold. Stamp your feet. Yeah. Yes. It's freaking freezing. You can't see it yet. The sprinkling is like a fine mist right now. Almost like when you're in the fog and you feel all that mist on your face, but the rain is coming. The rain is coming. It's blowing in from the ocean, and this is Southern California. People don't know how to handle the rain. We don't know how to walk in the rain. We don't know how to talk in the rain. We definitely don't know how to drive in the rain. I mean, I know how to drive in the rain, but that's only because I spent so many years touring around the United States and having to drive in every state, in every season. I still can't drive in snow, though. That one has always eluded me. All right, it is misty, it is wet, it is rainy. See you guys back at the car. Well, it's so uncomfortable and so moist. Well, that got a little crazy, because it did actually start to rain for real. People were trying to get on that tram, like trying to escape Saigon, you know what I'm talking about? But I did eventually make it to my car, made it home, ate some food, and the weather went from pretty much 80 degrees in the sun earlier to below 60 now. It's cold, which is all the more reason to wrap up this day someplace tropical, someplace exotic. It's Spike's famous Breezeway. Tonight, I'm going to be on Spike's Breezeway Tiki Cocktail. What's the show called?
Spike's Breezeway Cocktail Hour.
Spike's Breezeway Cocktail Hour. Once again, I promise I haven't even had a cocktail yet. I'm coming out here to do a little show and tell, and we're going to show off some of those Randotti Tikis. I don't remember what else, but look at this freaking amazing... This is my favorite home tiki bar of all time. Look at this place. How long did this take you to build? It's like 10 years worth of work back here.
Time, yeah.
At least 10 years.
It's hard to quantify, really.
Because I knew you, what, 11, 12 years ago, and there was already a Breezeway, and it wasn't Breezeway 1.0. So this is like a masterpiece that took just more than a decade to build. And look at this, Spike recently built himself, or rebuilt himself, a huge pond out here. Look, it's all lit up. Look at the freaking water. You can see in the water. Old vintage shells right there, little freaking waterfalls. I mean, look at this. This is incredible. It's literally a breezeway between Spike's house and Spike's garage. Just a normal little breezeway, a little entryway. And he's turned it in to this. And I kept telling him for years, dude, you got to do a tiki show. He never would listen until COVID, until he got really, really bored. And now that's what Spike's been doing the whole time. So if you're into tiki, if you're into tropical stuff, if you're into adult beverages, alcoholic drinks, all that kind of stuff, or just home tiki bar bills or creativity or Adventureland or whatever, go follow Spike's Tiki Hour. What is it?
Spike's Breezeway Cocktail Hour.
Spike's Breezeway Cocktail. It's because I made fun of it for so long and kept saying the wrong name that now that's all I could think of is the wrong name.
Totally.
So that's what I'm doing. Okay, a new pin is going to be out. By the time you see this video, the new pin will be out. Just go to randomland.com. That's the fastest way. Or store.randomland.com if you want an even faster way. Also, check out my Instagram and all the links that are at randomland.com because I've got some events coming up, some meetups. I will be in Kansas City at Planet Comic Con. Not as a guest, but just as a sort of guy walking around. So if you happen to be out there in Kansas City, say hi to me next weekend. Or it's this weekend. I don't know. I'm all mixed up now. Spike's going to make me a cocktail on the Tiki Drink Hour, Spikes.com's cocktail show. In fact, he's already made me a daiquiri. What's his game? What's his angle? Dude, and check this out. Check out Spike's new tiki mug based off a tiki that he carved that's in the breezeway. Look at this. One of his early tiki carvings is now in 3D mug form. I think these are for sale now, right? So if you're into tiki mugs, we're still waiting on that Randomland tiki mug. One day, get yourself a Spike's Breezeway Cocktail Tiki Hour glass of goodness. What's the YouTube channel?
Spike's Breezeway. It's breezewaycocktailhour.com.
breezewaycocktailhour.com. That's a lot of words, but I hope people will be able to rewind. They'll be able to remember it.
That's
Don't worry.
That's not the YouTube channel, is it?
No.
It's just a website.
That's just a website. What's the YouTube channel?
YouTube.com/Breezeway Cocktail Hour.
Oh, okay. Breezeway Cocktail Hour. We did it. All right, guys. Hey, look. I just noticed one of my tiki carvings is in here. Yes, I made it to the Breezeway.
The other one's still hidden.
Oh, the first tiki that I ever carved, the first tiki mask I ever carved is hidden back here. Thank God it's hidden because you don't want anyone seeing it.
I love that.
Yeah, but it's horrible.
I have to remodel this area. So.
I've got better ones now. I've got better ones. Anyway, that's it. That's all for St. Patrick's Day. I hope you guys enjoyed a little 1995 action at Disneyland. I hope you enjoyed it so much that you want to give it a big fat thumbs up and share it with your mom, your dad, your uncle, your sister, cousin, your friends, maybe your horse wife. I don't know. I'm not calling your wife a horse. I'm talking about your horse wife. You don't know what a horse wife is. You haven't been watching this channel very long. Anyway, it's time for me to end this show and join Spike on the Breezeway Cocktail Hour. And then I'll have done my duty. We can go home and sleep well.
All right, here we go, Master Jedi. Sorry about that, Justin. Please help me, Master.
Awesome. Everybody was panicking and going crazy trying to get on the tram and get out of the rain because it really did start to rain there for a bit. I can already see the end of it though. How much you want to bet in like 30 minutes it's going to be sunny and warm again. It was warm too. It was like in the high 70s, close to 80 degrees, and now it's below 60 at the moment. And we're all soaking wet. So you can understand why people are like, run for it. I got a friend who moved down here from Florida who will remain nameless, who for a while was like, everybody freaks out when it rains. You guys don't even get real rain. And then by the time they lived here for a year, was like, oh my gosh, it's freezing. The rain here sucks. Like, yeah, the rain here's cold. It blows, man. I'd rather have like a warm summer Midwestern rain or a Florida rain any day than a freezing cold California rain. It's like all drizzly too. Maybe I should cut all that out of the video. Talking about rain is boring. Talking about the rain is even more boring. Oh yeah, this will never make the cut. This will never make the cut.